2023 has been a fantastic year for board games. Let's look at the top 10. Hey, I'm Will, this is Cardboard Matt. We like to take a look at solo games in particular, but also we do some multiplayer stuff, some playthroughs, lots of reviews, some lists, and of course, it's all thanks to your support and liking and subscribing down below. Now, 2023, as I said, has been just a fantastic year. Here in Canada, we are a little further north than our southern cousins, and we tend to get games a little bit later. Generally 3 to 6 months behind. So I guess it's only fair that I'm releasing this a few months behind. Gives me a chance to play some extra games, as well as, dive a little deeper into last year's catalog. Of course, I'm not buying all these games on my own, although I will say none of these have been provided by publishers. I just mean that they have been bought by friends. I have friends who are all interested in the hobby and all spend way too much money on buying the latest and greatest, and I get the benefit from that. Of course, I buy a lot of games too, and of course, they also get the benefit from me learning and teaching and playing and reviewing. So we're going to take a look at the top 10 games, for my preference, that have been released in the year of 2023. This is based on the Board Game Geek release dates. Unfortunately, not the Canadian release dates, because some of these games haven't even gone to my collection until this year, until 2024. But let's start. We'll go just from 10 up, and then we'll come back and cover some maybe missed highlights that I couldn't quite get to. Number 10 is Evacuation. This is a Vladimir Suchý big box game. I guess all his games are big boxes. And this is a crunchier Euro game. There's a few different modes to play. While I did enjoy the card-based mode, it is very head-scratching and challenging. I'd probably recommend playing that, but it is, you may want to stick with the standard points-based mode to start, because the race-based mode got a little weird. Anyways, the point is, the Earth is dying, and you found a new planet, but it's really far away. So you are trying to keep feeding the people on Earth while dismantling the infrastructure, building spaceships, packaging it up, and sending people off to the new planet to then rebuild. And your kind of points is how well you managed to do that, and how most successfully you were able to set up the new planet. Of course, there is a interesting travel mechanism where you're sending spaceships full of equipment back and forth. It takes time to travel, so you don't just send these immediately. You do have to keep resources separate from old Earth to the new planet as well. Everything has to be, production is kept separate, and it is a very interesting, you could kind of say, S-curve to engine building, where you start off with a fully maximized engine on Earth, but it doesn't help you there. You need it on the new planet. You gotta get it there. There's you're playing an action selection where more and more actions per round is going to become very costly in energy. Where you take actions matter, how you arrange it matters, and of course you're competing with your neighbors against new locations on the new planet, on which actions and placement on the satellite, and meeting certain goals and requirements. And there's a lot to think about. It's very crunchy. The solo works, basically smoothly, because you're essentially just doing your own thing. There's not a whole lot to the AI, which I think is fine. I like the AIs. Well, it's not 100% play by yourself. There is an AI that kind of works. It is a simplified one that basically just blocks stuff. So I really like how it does that. Very crunchy, but I do give it a great recommendation. But it doesn't quite hold up to Vladimir Suchý's best games. Number 9 is Earth. This is I believe it's from Rise Up Games. This is a tableau building game where you are collecting dirt, playing cards to build out a 4x4 grid. You are trying to score and produce an environment that is suitable for various animals and meet various scoring criteria. There is a ton of asymmetry in the game in terms of how the cards and the starting resources and everything happens. and it is based on a very simple action selection, like I choose, you follow mechanism, much like Race for the Galaxy and Ares Expedition, San Juan, Puerto Rico, those types of games. And the deck of cards is absolutely massive, and it's all interesting. I recently did a review of this, if you want to go back and take a look. And I do have a thing for engine builders, so you'll usually see some of this stuff on my list. And this is the one that plays very well solo, although it is very hard to beat solo, especially on anything higher than easy. But I do highly recommend this one. Next is Barcelona. Barcelona is again, a very heavy game from Board and Dice. Some people call this kind of a T-series style game, even though it doesn't start with a T, just because it's from Board and Dice and is in that weight range. And the main gist of it is you're placing workers on what's essentially a grid of city streets. And each of those streets corresponds to a different action. And where they meet on the grid and where you place your worker determines which actions you are going to do. And that interesting puzzle of how do I get done what I want to get done, but also the workers you're placing, well, you want to have certain numbers of them around lots so that you can then build and get a lot of points. There is a ton of variability in this game where the layout and the scoring that comes up is really going to drive what your actions you want to do in this game and the goals you want to follow. And that really means that you're doing some very different things each game. Some games you might be going for the tramway cars and trying to travel all around the city for bonus placements, or other times you want to maybe connect things in a straight line for buildings. There's lots of stuff you want to do. It is very AP sensitive, so if you find that looking at a lot of options is difficult, then this is not for you. But because of the way the multiplayer works, typically you're going to want to build, and you're going to have to build, or you're not going to fall behind drastically. That does kind of fit you into a smaller selection of actions, which does help streamline the process. So great game, very thinky, very colorful, lots of variability, like it quite a lot. Number 7, favorite game that came out in 2023 is a Stonemaier game called Apiary. This has a worker placement where your bee workers in space are going out to explore the galaxy to get resources. They're building up their kind of queen bee mothership where they are, or their colony, with adding farms and different specialists and special buildings and facilities that give you lots of cool abilities. You're finding, seed cards for more abilities, and all to kind of push yourself to ascending and then getting some of those bigger scoring tiles. When you're placing your worker, which is essentially a bee die, when you pull them back later, you'll end up triggering some things, but then they move up in numbers. And once they reach the top of the pip value, which is 4, you're going to lose that bee, and it is going to go to kind of the bee cemetery, essentially, where you get some bonuses and things. That is both the end game trigger as well as kind of the natural cycle. So you have to constantly bring in new bees. You're signing them out. Other people are bumping them off so that you maybe get them back earlier, and just building a very free-flowing kind of tableau of interesting stuff. And I do enjoy that a lot. Number 6 is a game that is absolutely ridiculous, and yet somehow it just brings pure joy all the time. I have one son who loves this game with every fiber of his being, and the other son who loves this game with every fiber of his being. This is Thunder Road Vendetta. I believe Restoration Games published it. It's kind of a reprint and reimagining of an older game. It's a race. You are trying to get to the finish line first. The finish line is 5 tiles away. And brilliantly, what this game will do is that if one player is essentially eliminated, the finish line materializes at the end of the current, the current farthest tile. So you may not actually have to race the entire length. And then therefore, if someone does get eliminated, they're never sitting out for longer than a few minutes because the game is about to end. The absolute anarchy that happens in this game, where you're shooting each other, and that's triggering effects and other effects, and it's the effects and the effects dice that make this game. When you bump into somebody, you roll dice, and then that'll determine who in the top or bottom of the bumping gets pushed off, flung off, and in which direction. Also, damage can do similar things, and you end up sometimes pinballing around the map, bouncing off other people, and I've seen stand-up moments where someone from behind rammed into somebody else and ended up pinballing their way up into the front. I've also seen people, coming in aggressively to try to take somebody out and getting themselves flung into a wall and vaporized. It's wild, it's hilarious, it's family-friendly, easy to teach, and maybe I'll have a playthrough review at some point, but it is absolutely a ton of fun. Okay, number 5, I don't think I was expecting to like as much as I did, but because I don't usually go in for war games. And now this is not a Grognard style war game. This is more along the lines of Nemo's War, for example. There is chits, but it's more of a worker placement game, and this is Halls of Hegra. The story this tells, you really feel through the game. The game has a very purposeful arc where in the first few rounds of the game, you're trying to recruit volunteers from the city. You're trying to make supply lines to run out to, bring as much supplies that come back to your base. Your fort is essentially an old abandoned fort, and so it's piled deep in snow and it's half broken down. You're trying to reinforce the base and dig out the snow. You're uncovering things lost and buried in the snow. Maybe it's like communications equipment or an old cannon, and you're repairing these things and you're getting them ready because that the German invasion is advancing and will be upon you soon. So there's some bag building, there's some worker placement, and then you start to get, after those phases, you start to get into initial attacks. There's some initial, things showing up to kind of poke at you and to maybe block your supply lines. Now it's getting riskier to go out and get more supplies because, the Germans have patrols going or have some cannons that are starting to shoot at you from a distance. They're starting to put maybe planes into the air, and it's becoming more and more dangerous. And then finally, it's the invasion. It flips into a tower defense management game where you're trying to just hold on for dear life and, keep your people alive, hold them at bay, keep your equipment barely repaired and functioning to keep that one last final, foot held down until you can reach the end and win. And of course, a moral victory. Because I don't think historically they actually won. But anyways, even though it's a board game, the theme really comes through here. And the worker placement is tense and tight the entire time. And it really does tell a story through the mechanisms of the game. All right, number 4, and it's been a strong year for them because we are back with another Stonemaier game, and this is Expeditions. I love Scythe, and this is not Scythe, but it's in the Scythe universe. But it does a lot of things that I also love. You have your big stompy mech, and you are exploring out into the tundra. You're looking for some lost scientist who discovered something, you don't really know what, but you are exploring and covering new tiles. You're finding weird and eldritch equipment and gadgets and meteorite pieces, and you're bolting them onto your mech, and you're getting cool abilities. You're fighting off corruption. You're recruiting new and powerful helpers and people, and you are essentially tableau building, really. Like the stuff you're bolting on these mechs or these cards, and it does keep Scythe's goal system where the game end is triggered by the first person to get all of their goal stars out, and those stars are worth certain amounts of points. Of course, there's quests and things you have to do as well, and it all comes together in, I think, a very fun way. It's not maybe especially thematic, but it feels fun. You feel powerful by the end. You feel there's some very cool combos that you're feeling, and you feel smart by the time you're done because you were able to get some cool things going. And I think this will really reward higher level play once you kind of get to know what sort of things are possible in the game. Because at the start it feels like you could just play through this very randomly, haphazardly, and not really have things going. But then when you start to see the combinations, you start to see how different things fit together in different ways that help other things, you end up doing some really cool stuff, and it can be a lot of fun. It is a slow start, but the solo does work well, and the multiplayer, I don't think I would play it higher than 3, maybe 4. 5 is just right out. That would just take way too long. But it is a ton of fun, and of course, the artwork, absolutely love the artwork, and the production is great in here. All right, number 3 is... I have such a hard time deciding the top 3 of this. I played this one probably more than any other game on my list this year because I played through the entire game. And that is The Legacy of You. This is a Garphill Games solo-only game where you are a general or leader, I guess, in China, trying to build canals to divert the Yangtze, I think it is. You know that this area floods every year and decimates villages, and so you are leading the charge on building these canals to try to divert the flood to help protect people, and eventually, if you can, the goal of the game is if you're able to build it up enough and divert enough, then that will hold and we'll be able to handle future floods. However, at the same time, you have barbarians. Don't like what you're doing, and they see an opportunity to raid you. Maybe they like what you're doing, but they see you as an easy target because you're busy building. And they keep coming to raid and keep coming to take things from you. And so you're constantly having to fight off the raids, having to rush to build before the flood catches you and ends the game early, essentially. And then there's it's a very interesting resource management game where you are kind of juggling these things, trying to stay on top of stuff. You are getting villagers to help. You're building out encampments, essentially adding new worker placement spots, tucking cards for some engine building, playing cards for different resources and bonuses or one-time bonuses. You want to get more cards in your decks. There's a time-build deck building here. If your deck gets too small, then the flood is going to come faster, so you want to build that up. But what really makes this game sing is the legacy components. It is a non-destructible legacy where, as you play the game, you'll encounter cards that will say, like, when playing this card or completing this thing, go look at this number. And there's a companion book that will have a very short excerpt of text, just enough to give you a little bit of backstory. But then they add new stuff into the game. Might remove old stuff, might add some new stuff. And the game is a brilliant testament to self-balancing, where the better you do, the harder it gets. But the worse you do, the more tools you have to succeed and the easier it gets. And so you're playing in that balance until you're finding a way to, like, eke out a win by figuring out, the best mechanisms and the combinations of things. The way it handles that, it means that every game feels fresh as you're playing through the campaign. I only saw maybe half of the cards in the game, so there's a whole chunk of stuff that I haven't even experienced yet, maybe even more than half that I didn't even experience yet for added replayability. And it meant that there was always just a little bit of drip of new stuff as you played, and that kept me playing it. Also didn't help that the game was playable in 30 to 45 minutes and had almost, very little setup because you just took some things out of the box and away you went. Number two is really probably one of the best two-player games to release in a long time. Two-player only, although there are some unofficial solo variants that I might play on the channel, and that is SkyTeam. You have to do everything. You're a pilot. And a co-pilot, of course, but you're trying to get everything done before you crash. And there are so many different scenarios that change up what happens. And by everything, I mean you have to make sure the plane is level. You have to maybe dodge mountains. Maybe you've got a fuel leak and you're running out low on fuel. You have to actually be at the right height to hit the runway and not shoot past it or crash before you even get to it. You have to get the flaps down. You have to get the wheels down. You got to put the brakes on, and you have to do all these things. Oh yeah, you have to radio ahead and get all the other planes to get out of the way because you're coming in hot and you can't stop. And you have to do. And there's more things. There's ice. There's more modules, but you have to do all this while you're rolling dice and not communicating. So you and your co-pilot cannot communicate things. You roll those dice at the start of the round. You might get some re-rolls or some abilities let you manipulate things, but you can't talk. You are taking turns placing dice, and some actions you need to line things up perfectly. The tilt of your wing flap is the difference between the two dice that are placed on those wing flaps. And so, like if I place a 4 and you place a 5, we might level out again, but you might not. And if there's a mountain coming the way, or if you're landing, everything has to be perfect. And despite how difficult it is also still not impossible. While I have crashed numerous times playing this, when you do get a win, and which, by the way, is you do feel like you cooperated massively, and it was such a thrill of success and being able to, land this plane. It's very cool. It's very neat how they add in some thematic things based on real life airports. And a little tip, go online and look up the SkyTeam's official website because they have some print and play scenarios that are in the form of postcards. And these are stories from real pilots and what they had to do to land their plane under dire circumstances. And you get to kind of play what they went through in that scenario. So it's very cool. Absolutely fantastic two-player game. My wife loves it. The solo variants where you are essentially taking turns, roll in place, works extremely well. I might play that on the channel later. Comment below if you want to see that. It's such a great game. There's so much to explore in the box in terms of different modules and how they work together. Every game feels different, and you can also kind of adjust the difficulty by the different scenarios too. Absolutely fantastic game, and I hope they keep it in print. And then number 1, favorite game from 2023, and you'll probably notice there's maybe an omission here, but I'll get to that. That is Dune Uprising, Dune Imperium Uprising. Oh boy, I love Dune Imperium already a ton. You can go back and watch my top 10 list to see, of all time, to see where it ended up on the list. And Uprising, if you thought Dune was a knife fight in a phone booth, then this is a sword fight in a phone booth. It is It ratchets up the combat, the difficulty, the ways you can manipulate things and get things to flow with the spies. It makes engine building, not engine building, but the deck building more impactful and faster paced. I feel like there's more card flow in it. I did do a solo playthrough this, and you'll see it was a very exciting finish. It takes the Dune Imperium formula and just makes it wild. If you've seen the second Dune movie or read the books, this is essentially the Dune Part 2 to the Dune series. Dune Imperium was Part 1. Ix and the Tleilaxu expansion, I forget the name of it, Immortality, are very cool and adds in parts of the universe that you don't really see in the movies. But Dune Part 2, this is Dune Part 2. And the excitement is there. I think, I know you can you bring the expansions into Uprising. I think it might be best without expansions. I think it might keep all the expansions in the base game, because that's kind of a larger, meatier, slower paced experience, and keep Dune Uprising as a fast paced, frenetic experience. Yeah, it takes a lot out of you, but oh boy, it is so much fun. Doesn't hurt that Dune is one of my favorite IPs, but it's absolutely just fantastic. And the solo plays very smoothly. Again, you can watch my review. Works extremely well. All right, so first, probably the biggest omission, and only because I haven't played it yet. I've had it on my shelf. You can just see it. You can see it back there. I just have not actually had a chance to play it yet, and that is Voidfall. I feel like Voidfall would be pretty high up on my list. I like a lot of Mindclash stuff. I love the theme. I just haven't really had a chance to dive into it enough to give it any kind of ranking. So that's a big caveat there. And then some kind of just near misses that I would like to talk about. These are not necessarily my 11, 12, 13, but they're just ones that I want to kind of point out that did just make the list. First, we have Force Shuffle. Force Shuffle, can't get a hold of my own copy of my own. Well, I would love to have a copy though, because I thoroughly enjoy my plays. It doesn't have solo. That kind of hurts it a little bit. And I think there are some broken scoring potentials in there. If my last play with the Deer and the Wolves were any indication of just how broken that combo is, but maybe that's a player thing. Anyways, love the game. Haven't really played it enough to rank it. And also, I don't have my own copy. The next is That's Not a Hat. And I just want to point this out because I think it's probably one of the standout party games of the year. It is, you would think it like a memory, it's essentially a memory game. You only have, maybe 5 cards on the table for a 4-player game. And all you're doing is you're looking at a thing and say, oh, okay, it's a hat, and put it down, and then pass the card. And you're following the arrows, and you're passing cards around, and you have to say what it is when you pass it. And everybody has an item in front of them, and they receive a new item. Someone tells you what it is, and then you pass the old item, and you tell them what it is, following the arrows. And it's the game that it's almost is so much fun to show people. I mean, even if people have played it before, love it. But when you show people, everyone thinks, oh yeah, like 4 or 5 things. Like, I can remember the position of 4 or 5 cards around the table. Of course, that's easy, like child's play. And oh boy, does it devolve into guessing and bluffing fast. Because that hat card that you got, and you got it at the beginning of the game, and you lost track of it about 3 passes in, and do you have it now? Where did it go? Is it the neighbor to your right? Does he have the hat? Did he just give you the hat back? But he's calling it something else because he's messed up? Are you the one that's confused, or is he the one that's confused? Oh man, it is hilarious and so much fun. And the last one I want to give a kind of call out for is Ancient Realm. This is a button-shy civilization game. And you might be surprised, like, a civilization game in 18 cards, and you know, 3 of them are used for resource tracking. But yes, this is such an interesting concept. You are essentially building out a timeline, or a line. It's not so much a timeline, but you're building out a line, and each card is split into 2 or 3 pieces. And when you play a new card, you may have to pay some costs and things, but you're placing them and you're covering over some of the previous card and adding to that timeline. And so positioning matters. What you cover over, you're triggering, but then it disappears. So this is where some of the costs come in. And you're either playing new event, kind of event cards to your timeline that may add famous figures, or farm fields, or different things that like generate your resources or generate your point scoring. Or you can build wonders that give you even more massive point scoring, but are very costly. There are some cards with negative things and some symbols and set collection-y things. It does just so much in a very small amount of cards. Not to mention, even the back of the standard cards are also an event. So when that card is in the deck, the small deck, it's going to be an event that's currently taking place and affects some of the game. But then later on, it turns into a regular card. So the fact that you can get what really feels like a civilization building game, in a reduced state, obviously. I know it's not, it's not Civilization: The New Dawn or anything to that massive scope. Which, by the way, with the Terra Incognito expansion, amazing. So it's not anything big like that, but for a 15-minute game, boy, does it pull out the Civilization feels. That about does it for me today. That was the top 10 games released in 2023 that I've played, of course. If there's anything I've missed, please add it in the comments. I'm always looking for awesome games. And this list was obviously much longer, and I had to narrow it down to 10. But it was a very strong year for games, and all 10 of these are just absolutely fantastic games. You really can't go wrong. If you see something that looks interesting to you, go check it out. Or if I have a review of it, I have reviews of some of them. So thanks again for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps my channel kind of grow and get noticed. I am still a very small channel, and I'm just doing this for fun and love of the hobby and the people around it, and occasionally with my friends or on my own. So I'm Will. This is Cardboard Matt. See you next time.